Oh, we're live. Okay. Hi, everyone. Here we are this week, reassembled. Hope everyone's doing well. Today, we thought we'd talk about this whole idea of asking for help and why it's so hard for us. It's really, I think about it a lot, and I know for me personally, sometimes I know I need it, but some of it maybe I'm not sure who to ask. Some of it may be that I feel kind of ashamed or guilty that I am asking for help because I have this idea that I'm supposed to be able to figure out how to do everything. And as it turns out, like, actually when you do it, it's so wonderful for everyone, not always, and I just wanted to so today we're going to kind of share experience we've had where we've asked for help, with our, parenting and with our lives, and how that's kind of, and when I say paid off, I don't mean, it's just been a really positive experience. So, and if you have any of your own stories, we'd love to hear from you if you can relate to this, because I think, the struggle is real, that, especially with teens, that you feel more and more reluctant to ask for help along the way. So I'll start. I, was telling Sue the story yesterday, but we had a very quick move in our house. One of my sons was moving, and it all came about very quickly. And we had arranged things really quickly, and we got everything in order. But the one kind of piece of the puzzle that we couldn't solve was what to do with our pandemic pup while we were gone. And all of our usual, we only have a few, but all of our usual go-tos were not available, and it was very last minute. And so I, really thought about it. And I have a friend who, they had just had to put their dog down at the end of beginning of July, and I had been back and forth with her, and she was saying, oh, this was a while ago, but she had mentioned, if you ever, we are missing dog love, if you ever, need someone or need some help. And I'm thinking, yeah, that really. And so I just decided, what, I'm going to ask her. And, she texted back and she said, send me a cute picture so I can show the rest of my family, which I did. She said, we are all in. We are so excited, and we took the dog over there, and it was the biggest stress reliever. Like, it allowed us to all kind of be in the moment to, pack our kid and get him moved and deal with all of that. And to top it off, she sent, like, first of all, I think the dog was better at her house than she was at ours, but we'll get over that. But she sent great videos and pictures the whole time. And they really, when we went to pick the dog up yesterday, I mean, it was such a win-win for all of us. And I was so glad that I had thought to do it. And I think about it too, because with my own kids, a lot of times I'll say, why don't you ask? Why don't you ask? And everybody seems to be a little bit reluctant, and, then when you do, wonderful things happen, even if it's just a great conversation or whatever. So that's kind of my story. And I will pass it over to, I'll pass it over to Kamira. What about you?
Good morning. The asking for help is hard, not only because we think we should do it all, but I know that I never want to be the cause of someone else's discomfort, whether they feel uncomfortable because I've approached them, or they do it anyway and they really didn't want to do it. And that probably comes from, I've been on the receiving end of hearing one friend complain about doing a favor for another friend, and I never want to cause that kind of trouble for somebody. But I've missed out on things, right? Because friends have asked friends for everything under the sun, and they've gotten it and they've gotten over it, and whatever complaining is long forgotten. I try to encourage our sons to ask for help when you need it, especially when it has to do with school or if it has to do with work or something. A couple of years ago, just the spring break before COVID, I had screwed up our spring break plans. And so we had nowhere to go. And my husband was like, where are we going? And I had screwed up our Christmas break plans just before, a few months before. So I was really in trouble because I was 0 for 2. And so I called a friend who I know has a house in Palm Springs, California. And I was like, you are one of like the only 2 people in the world I would ever ask anything like this, but can we fly out and stay in your house? My husband really needs a break and I need to take people there. And I already screwed up once. I really can't come back to this man and tell him we have no plans. And she said, yes. and met us there. And we had so much fun, and the two families had fun. And then her family left because she knew my husband needed a break. He was under a lot of stress, and left us to the house. And it was our last family vacation. We haven't had one since because of COVID and everything else that's happened. So I'm really grateful that I was able to ask for help in that situation, because that help is lasting us for a really, really long time. Mm. I'm going to send it down to Eka.
Good morning. Kamira, I totally get it when you screw up and then you really need to ask for help. My problem with asking for help is with my teens, I never felt bad about asking them to help because I feel when they were growing up, I did everything for them. So I was a stay-at-home mom. I was working PTA at school. Basically like my life was around them. And so when I asked for something, they either did it willingly, unwillingly, or they would kind of look at me like, no. And all I would have to do is kind of give them the really? And then they knew because they realized that I did a lot for them. So they would step up when, they weren't always perfect. And but that was one thing I'd never felt bad because I didn't really ask that much. Now, the one thing that bothers me a lot asking for help is for my husband when I'm not strong enough to do something. And that to me is just like, ugh, I hate it. Like I'm not strong enough to like unscrew something, or I'm not strong enough to open a jar or whatever. And that just is really frustrating to me because I feel like that helpless female and I hate it. And I will struggle and struggle and struggle. And then he'll watch and he'll be like, do you want me to do that for you? And I'll be like, yes. And then if it's like something that's, that needs a screwdriver, he just goes like, and it's done. And I get so frustrated. So I just feel like, why can't I be stronger? So that's, I know it's trivial, but it's just one of my things. Cause then I feel like if I was ever alone, I'd be helpless. So that's one of my struggles. So I'm going to send it to Sharon.
Good morning, everybody. The one thing I was thinking about when we talked about this question, asking for help, is kind of a general observation that I've had to learn slowly over the years. And that's that asking for help and getting help from somebody can be relationship building. Because I always used to think, I don't want to burden anybody, like some others were saying. I don't want to inconvenience anyone. But sometimes people really do want to help. And, if your mother-in-law is saying, now we don't have babies anymore, but if they're saying, I really want to help watch the baby, or can I help clean up after this meal? They really want to because they want to do something for you, and that can be connecting. But on the opposite side, when there are people in my life who I really think need help, I could tell they're going through a hard time, and I want to do something to help them, but there's like this wall. And it feels like it can be a pushing away even when you say no to help from other people. So it is a balance because you don't want to be the person who's taking advantage of everybody in your life, but you do want to allow them the good feeling of doing something nice for you because this is a person who cares about you. And if they're saying, what can I do? Or can I make you a meal or whatever it might be because you're going through a hard time, I think it's almost if you're the kind of person who feels like you inconvenience other people, if you can think of it as like, I'm doing this person a favor and our relationship a favor by saying yes sometimes, that has helped me a little bit when I am reluctant and think I can do it all myself. I'm going to send it down now to Jen for her wisdom.
I like how you turned that into a positive, Sharon. Like, let me do you a favor by letting you help me. I'm going to keep that in mind. I'm having to relearn this a little bit right now in my life because we have 4 adult drivers in our home and only 3 cars. And 9 times out of 10, that is not a problem. But every once in a while, somebody, guess who, has to figure out how to make it work because we don't have enough cars. So all of a sudden I'm having flashbacks to high school. At our high school, there was no transportation. And I think 9 times out of 10 in high school, I just asked friends for rides home. I had to bum a ride home. The only time was if I had a piano lesson, then my mom would come pick me up and drive me. But otherwise, it was like, "It's up to you, kid. You figure it out. Either walk, get public transportation, ask a friend." And these days, I feel like if you suggest to your child that they ask a favor, ask a friend or their parents, God forbid, for a ride, it's like you have asked way too much. So I'm doing my best right now to model for them how it works when you do need to ask your colleagues for a ride or some other type of help, and to show that the world doesn't end when you have to ask somebody for a little bit of help. I don't know where they got the impression that they should be completely self-contained people who never have to ask anybody for anything, but they seem to have that impression. And recently, one of my adult-ish kids had to ask for a little help filling out some paperwork for a job. And there are things you don't know, and it's okay. We are not born knowing how to fill out a tax form, or, so you do have to ask. But the way she went about it was kind of cute. Like, she didn't just come out and say, "Hey, I'm going to need some help with this." She's like, "Can I come over and visit for a while?" And she was pet sitting somewhere. And I said, "Sure, come on over." She goes, "I'm going to bring my laptop and work on my onboarding, and I might have a few questions." Like, that's fine. That is why we're here. It is fine to ask for help. It does not mean, it's not like you turn a corner and you have to do it all yourself. So modeling behavior, it's like we come back to it so often. So I try to do that for my kids when I can, to show them that it is okay to ask for help. Mindy, have you gone yet? I don't think you have. I'm going to kick it up.
I have not. And I just did ask for help from my son there, who was in our camera view. I don't know if you could see, it looked like he was hiding behind a pole. So I asked him to help us all and get out of the way. Just to piggyback on what everyone has been saying, I too find it hard to ask for help, but it's so interesting, Sharon, to what you were saying, that it is relationship building. And I think when someone asks me for help and I can give it, it just feels great. So sometimes maybe we don't realize when we're asking people for help, we're making them feel good too, in addition to us getting the help. But just to add, when I had my kids, we lived in Canada, and when you had your first child, you automatically were invited to it was by the nurses. It was so long ago, I can't remember, but you were automatically invited to a group for new moms in your area. And everyone had children within the same age. I think it was probably when our kids were about 4 or 6 weeks old. And we went to the public health office, and there was probably 19, 20 of us. And it was wonderful because it was assumed you needed help. It was just assumed that you would have questions, and that we could all, this nurse was here to help us with our newborns. And that, I think that assumption opened everyone up to not being afraid to ask for help. Or I don't know what to do here, or my baby did this last night. And that group, we continued at least for 2 years, alternating between each other's homes. The initial group was only 6 weeks. And then we went on with this group for at least 2 years, and many of us remained friends throughout. So I think it's kind of a neat concept. If we just assume that everyone needs help, maybe it would be a little bit easier for us to ask for help and to give help, because I think all around it's a win-win. You ask for help, you get it. You give help, and you feel a little bit better. So I don't know. That is my story. Jessica, have you? All yours.
Goodness gracious. I have been, listening and nodding along. I'm trying so hard to think of an example that isn't just a straight up bummer. Just because all of my friends, I shouldn't even just say all of my friends, everybody I know, I feel like has the same mindset of like, oh, I don't want to bother you. I don't want to inconvenience you. And like, it's one of those, I'm not a mind reader. I can't, I'm the least observant person on the planet. I don't notice when something is going wrong until someone points it out to me. And I know for a fact that I'm always down to help anybody who asks it of me. And I try to, I don't know, just like you got to assume that the people around you have your best intentions at heart, and you know, oh boy, I've been thinking this whole time and I still haven't found a way to formulate the words. Just, you know, people can't mind read, and people want to be there for you, and I know that stubbornness runs in my family. Like, I can think of a million times where my bubby was like, I didn't want to bother you, I didn't want to inconvenience you, and my mom and my dad, and it's just, I just, like, you gotta say it, you gotta speak up. That wasn't a very good, that wasn't an example. Sorry. Sue, go ahead.
So I remember when my kids were little, this very joyful sense of everybody being in it together and needing to help each other and give help and get help. And as time went on, I think in the same way that we protect our stories as our kids get older, there's also like a little bit of a feeling of like, I can do this. And we all have in my world, the resources became more accessible. We have Uber, we have Uber Eats, we have ways to solve problems that I couldn't solve when my kids were little. And so I had to call somebody and say, can you pick up diapers for me? Because Dan's on call and I have run out of diapers, which I know there's many problems to that story, like why run out of diapers, but that's just what my life was like. And now I am at the point where I would so much rather be asked to help somebody than to ask somebody to help me. And I think a little bit of it is what I think Kamira was saying, that feeling like you don't want to end up someone else's conversation. Like, well, I can't come meet you for coffee because I'm taking Sue to get her blah, 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 right? Like that to me weighs so heavily. And also I'm very mindful of, is there going to be a chance to reciprocate? Like I'd rather this mutual relationship where we're both asking than I'm in need and you're not in need. So recently I was home. I had to go pick up my car before we took a driving trip, an 8-hour driving trip from the dealer. It was getting checked. And I thought I was going for an hour, but then my brakes needed to be replaced. So I called my friend and she came and picked me up and seemed really quite happy to have that time to visit. And then I asked another friend to take me back, and each of them were fraught with like, okay, I should just ask. I'll just ask. I'm not Ubering. That's ridiculous. And it turned out, as all of you would know, if I were telling the story to you and it wasn't you living with it, that it was kind of delightful because we had a chance to visit. They felt great about being able to help. I felt great about having a friend that would help. But I can't imagine that the next time it happens, I'm not going to feel the exact same way. Because there's some imbalance about these relationships that for me, I'd much rather get the call than make the call. So I don't know. And by the way, I'll tell you that the people that feel more comfortable asking rather than giving are have a different set of problems, right? Like the people who feel super comfortable about asking for help, but when you ask, have a little bit, the pause is just a second too long. And it feels like, I shouldn't have done that, Anyway, we have other people who want to jump in. Kamira, jump on in, followed by Sharon and then Jess.
So one thing we didn't touch on is crowdsourcing help. I do that sometimes with text strings or those group me's, and you have a question or you're looking for a professional of some sort or whatever, and you crowdsource the help. And I'm always fascinated by who responds, because it's never who you expect to respond based on relationships or maybe professions. It's always that unusual suspect, and they always go so much deeper than you would have expected. And it's a pleasant surprise. I think of it kind of like karma or some kind of universality principle that I've helped somebody and somebody over here is going to help me. It's not really going to be quid pro quo.
So while you were talking, I thought of an example of a time where I really had to ask for help, and it was kind of a big ask. So my 7th grader got sick at school. Of course, my husband was in a day-long meeting that he couldn't get out of at work, and I was headed out of town to meet friends for the weekend. This was pre-COVID. All the kids were in school. My husband was going to be home right after school. We had it all worked out. And then I get the call. I'm an hour from home. Your child has thrown up. What do you do in that circumstance, right? So I thought, who can I call? And then I thought, I can't even call because they'll pick up the phone. And then how are they going to say no if they don't want to be in the car with my vomiting child? So I texted a friend and I said, if you don't get this, that's okay. Because then she could pretend, if she was really worried about it, she could pretend she never got it. So I thought, if you have a big ask that's time intensive, texting is perfect because they can pretend they never saw it. But she's such a good friend. She called me like 10 seconds after I sent the text and said, of course I'll get him. Of course I'll drive him to your house. And not only did she drive him to my house, she made sure that he had her phone number in case he needed anything before my husband got home. She had crackers and ginger ale. And my kids still talk about this. And they're like, remember when Mrs. So-and-so did that? Like, it means so much to everybody. And I think she was happy to do it. And I can't believe it. So anyway, I would recommend the texting if you're making a big unsanitary ask like that.
That's a great suggestion. Okay, I think Jessica, you had something to add?
I was just gonna say, and as soon as I finish rambling about nothing, I think of an idea. But just on the opposite side, the smallest possible ask, I was trying to cook, and I couldn't open one of those like little Pillsbury, like the things that they're supposed to pop open, apparently, and I was struggling so hard to get that stupid thing open. And after so long, and I was already like cooking something else, so everything was timed. So I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna call my mommy. So I called my mom, and the first thing out of her mouth is like, hey, did you peel off the cover? And I was like, this thing, and it popped open. And it took exactly 5 seconds. Like 5 seconds versus 10 minutes of me twisting and pulling. And so it's like, at the end of the day, like, it basically cost my mom 5 seconds of her time. And at the end, if she couldn't do it, she couldn't answer the phone, like, whatever. But it didn't hurt anybody to ask.
She was happy to hear from you, Jessica. That's the thing you didn't realize, is that moms live for those moments. I still call my mom for help. And that's legit. That's the right thing to do.
All right. Well, Eka wants to add something in, and then I think we'll call it after that.
No, I was sharing about what you're saying is when our kids are in school and we fill out those emergency forms, emergency contact forms, I always would fill them out and I would call my 2 friends that I put on there. And sometimes the school would do the ask and it would save you, the school would call them and they would call you and then they would call your friend. And so it was almost like they knew if the school called, they were going to do it. So that was almost like a built-in helpline right there, which was helpful in case of those emergencies.
All right. Well, I think that there are some things that secure our spots, like I'm the spider killer in my house, or saver, because sometimes if I can, I'll save them. But no one seems to mind asking that favor of me. I'm sure we all have those moments. But the big ones can be hard. And so if you have anything to add after we hang up, you guys, we'd love to hear from you in the chat. And I guess we didn't come up with a topic for next week. That was a natural offshoot. So you'll just have to stay tuned to hear what we come up with for next week. Everybody have a great week.